Big news coming out of Bristol Motor Speedway this past weekend. Trackhouse has signed Zane Smith to a multi-year deal and will lease him to Spire Motorsports as the two teams will form a technical alliance starting next year. This also includes a new charter for Spire Motorsports that was acquired from Live Fast Motorsports for reportedly $40 million. Now, I have a lot to say about, just everything that's transpired so far. Number one, what does this mean exactly for Zane Smith going forward? Number two, what does this mean for Spire Motorsports? They're starting to look like they're starting to head into the direction of maybe being a little more competitive. What does this mean for Trackhouse moving forward? They got a lot of drivers, maybe not a lot of seats to fill. We'll discuss that in this episode as well. What does this mean for Live Fast Motorsports? They've made some announcements. We'll discuss that in this episode as well. And finally, how did Ford completely fumble the bag? Their top prospect in the pipeline will now be gone as soon as we reach 2024. We're going to discuss all that in today's video. So without any further ado, let's begin. Okay, I'm just going to jump right into this because there is a lot to dive into with pretty much this whole thing that's going on right now. The first thing I want to talk about is what does this mean for Zane Smith, really the driver at the epicenter of all of this. So, Zane Smith, currently in the Truck Series, the defending Truck Series champion, currently in the playoffs, trying to defend his title, kind of having an hit or miss kind of year. Started the season off hot. I think he won 3 out of the first 5 races, but right now he's currently 5th in the standings, minus 14, looks poised to miss the Final 4. Not the greatest title defense for the driver of the number 38 truck. However, I will say this. I think this is a great move for Zane Smith. The reports came out that Zane Smith, he basically said, I want to go cup racing. I've been in trucks. I don't want to stay in trucks any longer. I want to go cup racing. And to Zane Smith, why shouldn't he go cup racing? Now, there are going to be people out there who say, well, why doesn't he go Xfinity Series racing? And that's a fair point. However, the truck cars are actually more similar to the current next-gen Cup car in terms of the driving style. It's better, from what it sounds like, to actually be racing in trucks because that style of racing and driving will translate better to a Cup car than Xfinity to Cup. So in a weird way, it would make more sense to skip the second tier in the development ladder and go straight from third to the top level. I'm going to make a whole video about how NASCAR's ladder system basically makes no sense, but that will come at a later time. I think this is a great move for Zane Smith. He's getting an opportunity to, we'll talk about it a little bit later on, a car that actually might be decently competitive here. Now, we got to remember, this is still Spire we're talking about. While, yes, he did sign with Trackhouse, in the short term, I don't expect much from Zane Smith in the Cup Series next year because while, yes, he is going to Spire and Spire is going to have a technical alliance with Trackhouse, I'll discuss it later on. It sounds like he's going to be at the highest, the second driver in that team because Corey LaJoie is going to be driver number 1. I really don't see him or Carson Hocevar, who sounds like he's going to take over the 77. I don't see any of those two drivers stepping up and overtaking Corey LaJoie, who's had a lot of flashes driving the number 7 car, nearly won Atlanta last year. So, short term, I think Zane is kind of just, it's interesting because I want to say he should be running anywhere from 21st to 25th in points, and I think that's fair. But again, we're talking about Spire, and rookies tend to struggle in Cup. It's why people who said that Ty Gibbs was a guarantee to win a race and make the playoffs. I'm thinking, what are you guys talking about? When was the last time we had a true rookie show out and just show up day one competitive? Chase Elliott. After him, name me the last one. You can't. It's probably Juan Pablo Montoya back in 2007 or Joey Logano back in 2009. That's how long it's been if you take out Chase Elliott, of course, in 2016. But I think this is a long term. I think this is great for Zane Smith. He's going to be going to Trackhouse, which they said they want to open the 3rd car in 2025. Where are they going to get the charter? That's a discussion for another day. But long term, I think this is great for Zane Smith. He's going to go to a new modern team for NASCAR and Trackhouse, and a very competitive team in Trackhouse as well. How competitive? We'll talk that a little bit more when we dive into the technical alliance with Trackhouse and Spire. But to conclude on my Zane Smith segment, I think that this is a great move for Zane Smith, especially if he could come into the Cup Series back with back-to-back Truck Series titles. I think the hype train for Zane Smith is going to be through the moon, even though I will say for his rookie season, temper the expectations. So that's for Zane Smith. Now let's talk about Spire Motorsports as a whole. And now it's when I'm going to be diving into the technical alliance part with Trackhouse. So there's a couple things I want to point out here when it comes to Spire. Number one, just very briefly, I want to talk about Corey LaJoie. I think LaJoie is a big winner in really this whole Trackhouse Spire technical alliance. Corey has shown a lot of flashes driving that 7 car. And look, I wasn't the biggest fan of Corey LaJoie. I'm going to be fairly honest, because he gave off that vibe of, well, yeah, I'm not the problem. The equipment is the problem. And to me, if you want to be the lead driver in an organization, you got to be able to shoulder some of the blame if things go wrong. I mean, look at Chase Elliott. He shouldered the blame when he wrecked Denny Hamlin. He got the suspension. He said, yeah, that's on me. Even though at first he tried saying it wasn't on him, eventually he came through. Let's see if Corey can finally start to do that now that he might have some decent equipment underneath him. And I think with that decent equipment, I truly believe that Corey is going to be a threat to finish top 20 in points. Playoffs, that's a whole nother discussion, just because there's so many competitive cars on the field. I mean, we just had 200 cars miss the playoffs. We had a Gibbs car miss the playoffs. A Penske car missed the playoffs. There's so many competitive cars in the field. To say that to now bring Spire Motorsports into the mix, I'm not saying Corey's not going to make the playoffs. I will be surprised. I mean, I will be surprised if Corey makes the playoffs. But top 20, I think, is 100% in question. I mean, he was top 15 in points for, I think, the first 3 to 4 races of the year. So it is definitely possible. Now let's talk about the technical alliance with Spire and Trackhouse. I think people need to temper their expectations. Here's why. Is Spire going to be better? Absolutely. I think Spire will 100% be a better team next year than they are this year. On all cars, 7 to 77, whatever they name the third car with their third charter. How competitive are they really going to be? Yes, they got a technical alliance with Trackhouse, but folks, Trackhouse has won 4 races in the past 2 years. And they only got 1 driver in the playoffs this year. It's a big deal. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Trackhouse is a bad team, but Trackhouse is closer to RCR than they are to Hendrick. Let's put it that way. Like, Hendrick is still clearly the top of the pylon, and then Trackhouse and RCR are about 1 to 2 levels down. So I still think Spire will be competitive. How competitive is going to be the question, especially because they spent $40 million on a charter. I get it, why they're doing it, because they're banking on the new TV deal. And I get why Trackhouse didn't want to buy a third charter, because they don't think that they're ready to open a third car. Completely understandable. I'm not sure if Spire is ready to open a third car either. They can't even get the 77 car to consistently run inside the top 35. So I'm supposed to trust a team that can only have 1 decently competitive car out of 2 to all of a sudden have 3 truly competitive cars? In my opinion, it would have been smarter just to put Zane Smith in the 77. Now you might be thinking, oh, what about Carson Osavar? Folks, if you had your choice between Carson Osavar and Zane Smith, now you might be thinking to yourself, well, Carson Osavar, he's been great so far in the Cup Series, driving that 42 car. He won 3 races this year in the Truck Series. He's been outstanding. He definitely deserves a Cup ride. I see your point. However, I'm pretty sure I've said this even in the past as well. There is a big difference between running part-time in Cup and running full-time in Cup. You're talking a different mentality, a different mindset, the way you got to drive the race itself. I mean, let's be honest here, folks. If you're running part-time, you're not worried about points. You're not worried about, really the other guys around you. You're just worried about getting experience, making the most out of the opportunity. Is Hocevar really going to, do you really expect Carson Hocevar, the 77 car, to be consistently running top 15 in a Spire car in that 77 that has not been competitive since it was started? I don't. I think Carson Hocevar would fall back to around 25th running. And that's nothing to do with Carson Hocevar. I think Carson Hocevar is a really good driver. But again, different mindset. The way you approach the race is completely different from part-time to full-time. I think we all know this. It's pretty obvious, in my opinion. There's plenty of examples out there where you see drivers who have flashed in the Cup Series part-time, they go to full-time, and then they tend to struggle. That's just what it is. It's a different mindset when you're running full-time to part-time. Look at AJ Allmendinger in 2022, just last year. I think at an average finish, I think of like 10th or 13th, running part-time. Everyone thought that he was a playoff lock this year. And then comes 2023, and he falls back to the means because it's a different mentality. It's a different way you got to approach these races as a part-time driver to a full-time driver. And while, yes, Carson Hocevar has been very impressive in trucks and Cup and even in Xfinity, it's 1 year. I need to see if he could do this consistently. I personally would put him one more year in trucks, maybe in Xfinity, see if he could consistently do this. And then I would move him up to the Cup Series. But moving him up to Cup automatically next year, I don't hate the move, but I'm not the biggest fan of it either. And on top of that as well, so you got Zane Smith, who, yeah, he hasn't really made many Cup starts himself, but he's ran trucks, I think, for the past 4 years, made it to the Final Four every year, the defending Truck Series champion. I think Zane Smith's resume speaks for itself way more than Carson Hocevar. I personally would have put Zane Smith in the 77, especially knowing that Trackhouse wanted to open a third car. Well, then guess what? When Zane Smith goes to that third Trackhouse car, put Carson Hocevar in the 77 then. After he's proven that he can consistently compete year after year. And not just after 1 year and you take the risk that he's a one-hit wonder or 1 year wonder. I don't think he is. I think he's been very impressive. And I think he will be decent in a Spire car. And when I say decent, I mean he'll be running anywhere from 20th to 25th. I just personally think that's what's going to happen because, again, that mindset change between going part-time to full-time, that's just what I personally think is going to happen with Carson Hocevar because, again, I've seen it before. Again, look at AJ Allmendinger. Everyone thought he was a playoff lock, and he's not even in the playoffs currently. I don't even think he's top 20 in points. So, let's talk about the last thing that I want to talk about before we go on to Ford. Live Fast Motorsports. I've seen a lot of people on social media saying, oh, I feel bad for Live Fast Motorsports. There's no place in the Cup Series for these small teams anymore. It's just all the big guys. If you could bring the money, you're going to be in the Cup Series. No more room for the small guys. Yeah, that's how it should be. Folks, this isn't the 1970s or the 1960s. Where you could pretty much pick up any random car in the street, put a V8 motor into it, and then you could go racing the Daytona 500. This is the top level of stock car racing in America. And if you really want to get technical, this is the top level of auto racing in America. You shouldn't have just random people, if you will, random people. I use quotation marks because Matt Tiff and BJ McLeod are nowhere near random people. They're more than qualified. But you shouldn't have random people just being able just to afford a Cup Series team. Now, you might be saying there's an appeal to that, and of course there's an appeal to that, but at the same time, what's better for the sport as a whole, do you think? I mean, I've talked about Formula One and the Andretti saga all last year. But what's one of the big reasons why F1 teams claim that they don't want to put Andretti Autosports in the sport? They don't want a team that's not going to be competitive and not bring any value to the Formula One grid. What value does Live Fast Motorsports bring to the Cup Series? They got a great program. Don't get me wrong. They got incentives. They got programs where, you can be a fan, pay a couple $100, and boom, you're on the pit box. Great fan experience for Live Fast Motorsports. But as for the product itself on the track, what do you think is better for the sport? Having a car putt around 30th to 35th every single week, having really no shot at being competitive, or a team that actually could be competitive, can run top 20, stay on the lead lap, and if cards fall the right way, probably has a shot at the win. Folks, this is the top level of American auto racing in America. It should be hard to get in. It should be. If you can afford to be competitive, go out to do it. If you can't afford to be competitive, why are you in the Cup Series? Again, this is the top level of American motorsport. You shouldn't be incentivized just to putt around and not be competitive. It's like, I'm going to use a college football analogy, for example. Georgia versus TCU. Everyone was like, TCU making it to the finals. It's a great story, a fantastic feel-good story. And then what happened? Georgia completely destroyed them. It was one of the worst college football finals in history. Yeah, feel-good stories are great. But I care more about seeing competitive racing. I care more about seeing a competitive, good product on track, more so than a feel-good story. If I want to see a feel-good story, great. I'll go watch a movie about a feel-good story. When it comes to the on-track product, I care more about a competitive product. I care more about more competitive cars on track than a feel-good story or a small team just trying to make it by. I mean, let's use another example. Levine Family Racing. Yeah, they were a feel-good story, even with the technical alliance with Toyota. They weren't competitive. They come out, 2311 comes in. And guess what? 2311 has actually impacted the sport. They've actually won races. It's the same thing here. Now, is Spire going to be that competitive? Who knows? We have to wait and see. But I'd rather see more competitive cars on the track than less competitive cars on the track. And I think we can all vouch for that. So let's talk about the final thing that I want to discuss. And this one, oh boy, I'm going to rip on them. So, imagine this. Imagine that you have a job lined up. It's the best job that you want. It's the everything that you can ask for. And you still find a way to fumble the bag and you don't get the job. You fail the interview, even though it's basically all but handed to you on a silver platter. Well, that's basically what Ford did with Zane Smith. Ford had their best prospect, probably since Austin Cindric and Chase Briscoe, in their pipeline. All they needed to do was find him a seat. You're telling me Ford couldn't find him a Cup Series seat? You're telling me Zane Smith wouldn't have taken an SHR car in the 10 or taken the 38 car? It's really like Ford didn't even bother trying. I mean, folks, you got front row who went with Michael McDowell and Todd Gilliland. I like that driver lineup. I like Michael McDowell. He's proven he belongs in that car. And Todd Gilliland, don't get me wrong, has improved. But who's a better prospect? If you're Ford, who do you think can take you to a better shot at winning races and competing for championships? Zane Smith or Todd Gilliland? Todd Gilliland, who in the same car that Zane Smith is driving, the same truck that Zane Smith is driving, has won, I think, only one race. And ever since Zane Smith took it over, has been a championship contender and won a championship. They chose Todd Gilliland over Zane Smith. Okay, weird, but okay. What about Stewart-Haas? Well, they're not really good enough as is, but let's take a look at their lineup. Kevin Harvick is leaving. They've already signed Josh Berry. You got Chase Briscoe. He's not going anywhere. So that leaves the 41 and the 10. Again, I'm going to ask the same question with that I asked with Todd Gilliland. Who is going to lead you more to the promised land to actually win races and compete for championships? Zane Smith, Eric Almirola, or Ryan Preece? I'm going to go with the driver that's actually won a championship in the top 3 series, and that's Zane Smith. Almirola, he's not going to lead you anywhere. He's more out the door than anything. So he's not going to lead you anywhere. He's out. And Ryan Preece, he's been worse than Cole Custer has been this year. He's been worse than Cole Custer, and people were going after Cole Custer's head last year, saying, move him out of the 41 immediately. And Ryan Preece has been worse. So don't get me wrong, Stewart-Haas Racing as a whole has not been good. But out of those 3 drivers, I think Zane Smith has a way better shot at elevating that program than Eric Almirola and Ryan Preece. And Eric Almirola, he may retire. What are they going to do with the 10 car? They're going to promote Riley Herbst. And speaking of Riley Herbst, let's talk about Ford's pipeline right now of developmental drivers. Who is the best developmental driver right now for Ford? Now, I'm not going to include guys like Ty Majeski and Ben Rhodes because they've been in trucks for so long and they've switched manufacturers, except Majeski. He's been a Ford guy, I think, for life, so I might have to include him. But Ben Rhodes, he's been with Chevy, Toyota, Ford. He's not really a Ford guy. He's just, wherever ThorSport's going, I'm going. But let's go with the pipeline right now for Ford. Who do they got? Well, they got Cole Custer, winning races in Xfinity, currently competing for the championship. Move him into the Cup Series. Except they've already done that. And he's been abysmal. He had a okay rookie year, and the only reason it was an okay rookie year is because he won a race. If he didn't win that race, honestly, his career in Cup would be atrocious. And it was from 2021 to 2022. He was not good. I don't think he has a top 5 since his rookie year. So you move him back to Cup, what's to say that that's not going to happen again? So you got a former Cup Series bust in the Xfinity Series right now. What about his teammate, Riley Herbst? Oh, you want to talk about a bust? He just missed the Xfinity Series playoffs in a Stewart-Haas car. And Stewart-Haas is actually competitive in the Xfinity Series. He missed the playoffs to the 48 car in the Xfinity Series that's considered a mid-pack car that gets almost no funding. He missed the playoffs to that car. He's never won a race in the top 3 series. I don't even think he has a championship at all in motorsports. Riley Herbst is not a Cup guy. He's not a NASCAR guy, in my opinion. He would be an immediate bust, in my opinion. He's nowhere near ready for a Cup ride. That may sound harsh, but that's reality. All right, so let's keep moving on. Ford doesn't really have anybody else in the Xfinity Series, so let's go to trucks. Well, let's go to ThorSport, and they got Ty Majeski, who's only won 3 races in the past 2 years, but he does have a Final Four appearance, so at least he's got that. And the last time he was in Xfinity, he was in that atrocious 60 car. So Majeski maybe, but I don't think he's a Cup guy. And then you got Haley Deegan, who, I mean, she's just the next Natalie Decker, the next Danica Patrick, in the sense of a lot of hype. People think that she can do something, and she's done next to nothing at all. I don't even know if she's got a top 5. So let's take a look again at the pipeline. You got a former Cup Series bust. You got a driver who just missed the playoffs in competitive and playoff equipment. You got Ty Majeski, who honestly might be the best shot out of the drivers I just mentioned. And then you got Haley Deegan. That is Ford's pipeline now that Zane Smith has moved to Chevrolet. Ford could have built on Zane Smith, their best prospect in their pipeline. And they just said, nope, we're going to let him walk. It's all good. We don't need him. It's fine. Especially now that Ford is really struggling in the Cup Series. Folks, you want to know of the 4 drivers that were eliminated in the playoffs? 3 of them drove for Ford. You got the 34, the 4, and the 22. You got an SHR car, a front row car, and a Penske car. 3 out of the 4 that were eliminated were from the Blue Ovals. And really, besides RFK and really besides Chris Buescher, do you trust any of the 4 guys in the Cup Series to really compete for the championship? Yeah, Brad Keselowski's basically been neck and neck with Buescher, but unlike Buescher, Keselowski can't close the deal. That's why people are saying, oh, why is Buescher way more ahead than Keselowski? Yeah, they're neck and neck, but Buescher's actually been able to close the deal and win races. Keselowski has yet to do that. And Penske, they've kind of been mid-pack this year. Blaney's been a no-show. Cindric has had a sophomore slump. And don't even get me started on Stewart-Haas Racing. I've already talked about them enough. So you got one driver that they're depending on to even compete for the championship. They're losing Kevin Harvick and bringing in Josh Berry, who has yet to win a race in Xfinity this year. You could add Zane Smith, very promising young driver, the best driver in your pipeline, but you decide to let him walk. Yeah, great job, Ford. Great job on managing your driver pipeline right there. Who knows what's going to happen now with Ford? I mean, their driver lineup in terms of young guys in the Cup Series, I mean, they still got Chase Briscoe, but I think he's about to hit 30. Ryan Preece isn't really a young guy. I mean, I guess they got Ryan Blaney and Austin Cindric, but other than that, what are they going to roll with? Eric Almirola, Ryan Preece. A lot of their drivers are coming off of pretty mediocre years. It's not a good look for Ford's driver development when they basically told their top prospect to go walk. Yeah, that's not the best look for Ford in my opinion. But then again, I'm a Chevy guy, so I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Chevy's continuing to dominate as long as Larson keeps winning races, as long as Hendrick is doing well. I'm happy. So, yeah, I'm cool with it. Although, objectively, Ford completely fumbled the bag here. So that's going to do it for this episode. I know it's been a while since I've made an episode, but, a lot of things have been going on, especially over the past 3 weeks. If you follow me on my Twitter, you'll be able to see that, or my X, I guess it is now. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys want to follow me on my social medias, follow me on Twitter, I guess now X, and TikTok at Motor Minister. If you guys want to please like, share, and subscribe as well here to the Motorsport Ministry. We're going to start to get back on track, start to post a lot more videos, a lot more content, a lot more better content. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one.